חברים, אני אפתח. Few words in Hebrew and I'll switch to English. אז קודם כל ברוכים הבאים למפגש הזה, שהוא מפגש שחברו אליו מספר קבוצות. אני אעבור לכבוד השגריר לאנגלית. So, good evening to everybody and especially good evening to His Excellency the Ambassador Z'an Daniel Rosh, who is honoring us today with a lecture about the Swiss economy. We know that on everyday life we are fighting in order to move Israel toward individual freedom and free markets, and there is states around the world that we can look up to. Switzerland, which is usually among the top 10 in the freedom index and the economic index, are one of these countries. And hopefully we will enjoy from the lecture and learn how we can improve and move Israel toward this direction of economic and individual freedom. So I thank you, Ambassador, and you can take the stage.
Thank you very much. Is it okay like this? I prefer to have my hands free. Any economic system is very much dependent on the political system also, so I will also speak about our political system. But one issue which is maybe not enough in our presentation is the issue of education, because I think that our economic success is directly connected to our very special education system. You will see many specificities which are totally different from everything you know, be it in the European Union, be it in America, be it in Israel or anywhere else. And I really don't want to give the impression that the recipes that work for Switzerland would work for Israel or for any other country in the world. Our political and economic system really grew organically over the centuries, and it worked for us. Now, we can discuss later if you want, if there is something that inspires you. But to start with, just that everybody has the same data and the same basis, some words about the structure of our society. So, we are a pretty diverse country. On the left side, which is the West, this light blue represents the French-speaking population, which is concentrated in the West and represents about 23% of the population. Everything which is in this light red are German-speaking territories, and they represent about 63% of the population. The southern part, the greenish, is the Italian-speaking population, 8%, and the yellow spot is our most, how should I say, exotic minority. There are only 50,000 or maybe even less today. They speak a language called Romansh Grishun, and which is a direct transposition or direct legacy of Latin, of the kind of Latin that was spoken in the times of the Roman empires there. And actually Hans Christian comes from that region. So you see, we're trying to promote also minorities. Altogether, the population makes a population which is a little bit less than Israel, mainly because you are growing so fast. The natality is much stronger than in Switzerland. But 8.5 million is roughly one in the same category of small states. We have also a pretty impressive religious diversity, with traditionally about half-half Protestants and Catholics. They fought. There were civil wars between Protestants and Catholics. Nowadays you have a bit more Catholics, mostly because of the immigration from Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, since the end of the Second World War. And also because many Protestants left the church because they don't believe anymore. That's why you have this high number of people who are not, these 25% are people who are not recognizing themselves in any religion. So many people just stepped out of religion. We have civil marriage in Switzerland, so you don't need to belong to a religion. 25%. It's also, bonjour Amir. It's also because some of them left for financial reasons. We have this peculiarity in many cantons that when you fill your tax income declaration, you have put your religion. And if you put your religion, for Islam, put Protestant, then automatically one part of your taxes, or actually an additional part of your taxes, will go to the Protestant church, which is subsidized like that by the state. I'm not sure, does it work also for the Jewish communities? Amir, do you know that?
Not that I know.
Not that,
It works in Bern.
yeah, in Bern.
In Bern, they have the rabbi, which is financed by the, which is
paid like a state employee.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's cantonal. In some cantons there is, it doesn't work that way. Anyway, a big, also a very significant religious diversity. Then immigration has been pretty steady since the 50s, with many refugees. First it was workers, then from the 90s we started to have asylum seekers and refugees, mostly as a result of the wars in the former Yugoslavia. So many Serbs, Bosniaks, and Kosovo Albanians. Altogether, the people with an immigration background represent 37%. Immigration backgrounds means foreign residents plus Swiss citizens who have one or both parents who were not born Swiss. And actually over the last years, again, the economic immigration became the most important, which means that now the first group of foreigners residing in Switzerland, among those 25%, are Germans. Then come, I think, Portuguese or Spanish or Italians. Italians, then French, then Portuguese, then you have Kosovars, then Spaniards, then Serbs, and then the rest. So a very diverse society, as you said. Now, how do we manage all that? Well, first, there is a traditional division in 26 cantons. You can see that the cantons do not follow the linguistic lines. For instance, you have here Valais. This is where people go skiing usually. Half is French-speaking, half is German-speaking. Geneva and Vaud are fully French-speaking, but again, Fribourg is like 2/3 French-speaking, 1/3 German-speaking. Bern has a tiny minority. Bern is this big canton here in the middle. Has a tiny minority which is French-speaking, etc. To speak about one of the largest cantons, which is Graubünden here, Davos is a known place. So Davos is there, the famous World Economic Forum. And it has, actually it is the only canton which is trilingual, with Romansh, Italian, and the majority were speaking Germans. The cantons are very, very autonomous. Actually, according to our constitution, it says that each canton is sovereign, as long as their sovereignty is not limited by the constitution. In most federal states or decentralized states, the system is that the central state, the constitution, is giving powers to the states or the Länder in Germany, the states in America, and the rest belongs to Washington or to Berlin, to the central state. Switzerland, it is the opposite. Everything which has not been delegated expressly from the lower level to the central level remains in the responsibility of the local level, of the cantons. So for instance, the tax system is very local. We pay about 80% of our taxes at the local level in the canton, according to the cantonal law. And part of it even according to the communal law. Part of your income goes to the municipality, and the municipality is free to set the rate. I was once in a local assembly, in my community, in my village, and the agenda item was raising of taxes, because they had to build a new bridge, and they wanted to, and we voted. We voted. Who is in favor? Who is against raising taxes on your income? And mind you, it was accepted, which is Usually people don't like to pay higher taxes, but when you know for what you are paying the taxes, then it's easier. But also police, education, health, and is local. The primary competence is local. And of course, because these cantons were small states built out of history, there is a very strong sense of local identity. Next. So, what is amazing in this very large diversity is that, despite that, we managed to have a pretty fair, a pretty even distribution of wealth and of economic activity. Now, if we go let's go back to the previous slides. So, we can see four main, let's say, hubs of economic activity, where economic activity is really thriving. The most important one is obviously Zurich, here, which is a financial center, UBS Credit Suisse, Paradeplatz, Bahnhofstrasse. This is the financial center of Switzerland. Now, mind you, the financial industry accounts only for 8 to 9% of our GDP. So this is not so important as people usually think. But Zurich is also the center of innovation, of startup creation, so fintech, obviously, thanks to one of the two federal schools we have. I said education is local, also universities are cantonal. But you have two federal schools, only two, which are state-of-the-art, are in the top 100 of all rankings, sometimes in the top 10. And one of them is in Zurich, and one of them is in Lausanne, on Lake Geneva. And those two have proven to be a reservoir of startups, of innovation. So Zurich is one big center. Then Basel, here, Basel, which is, in Basel habe ich den Judenstaat gegründet. This is what Herzl said. I think you understood. So Basel, which is dear to the heart of Israelis, is the center of the pharma industry, mostly. Novartis, Roche are the big names there. Then you have the Lake Geneva region around Geneva. Geneva is finance and watchmaking mostly. And the region of Lausanne, where you have these other schools, so many startups, actually drones. Actually drones. There they are world leaders in civilian drones. And also among the big companies which are known in that region, you have Nestlé, which is also one of the main food producer and food retailer in Israel, but all over the world. And the last region is this part here, around the Neuchâtel, Bern, Jura, which is a hub for industry, manufacturing industry. This is the center of watchmaking. So I'm sure you've heard about Swatch Group, Omega, Longines, Rado, all is coming from that region, which is the region I come from. So I should be a watchmaker. So let's go back. So you see that the GDP is pretty well divided between those various regions. I will not enter into the details. The system works pretty well. Some basic data, our GDP is 690 billions. I'm not sure Israel what 300 or something, or 400, something like that. Half. Yeah, it's more or less half. The GDP per capita, $80,000. I think Israel is around 40. We have an amazing trade surplus, which tells about our industrial capability. Our exports are mostly pharma, machinery, Schindler. You see Schindler elevators all around. This is also Swiss. The watchmaking, the pharma, and the machinery. The trade surplus is quite impressive, 84 billion Swiss francs, which is the same in dollars. I like to quote our trade surplus with China, because I'm not sure there are many countries who sell to China more than you buy from China. In our case, we managed to have a trade surplus of 15 billion with China. All this reflects very well on the public accounts. Last year, the budget of the Swiss Confederation was in the positive with 2.9 billion. I think it has been in the positive for 15 years or so.
That's not because of the law. In 2001, that's because of the law that was that bids to have deficits.
Yes, well, I mean, there is, well, you cannot, it's not forbidden to have a deficit.
Yeah,
but there is an obligation for the state to look to have even accounts, and if you lose 1 year, then you have to compensate the next year. And also, the same law is requesting the government to reduce the public debt. So we have one of the lowest public debts among the industrialized world. If you count all the public collectivities, public administrations at the federal, cantonal, and city level, it's only 30% of the GDP. And if you look only the federal debt, it's something like 15% of the GDP. So it's extremely low by any standard. Can we move on? So now it comes to the complicated stuff. How did we manage to have such an even distribution of resources between all these regions? Well, one answer is obviously the federalism, because each canton, each one of the 27 constitutive states, can develop its own economic policy and develop a kind of healthy competition between the regions. I will give you one example. One region which is thriving now is a place called Zug. Now, if both of us, we would live in Zug, we would pay at least 50% taxes less. Now, of course, it's not very convenient to work in Israel and be in Zug, or to work in Bern and be in Zug. But of course, then it would be compensated by a higher price for the housing. But still, for companies, for many companies, it's very attractive to go to a place like Zug. In other places, they will try to sell the quality of their workforce. For instance, in my region, the watchmaking region, we have a superb system of education for mechanics, for technicians, for engineers, and people will go there because the workforce is the best in the world, etc., etc. So you have this competition between the cantons, which is sort of obliging them to show a comparative advantage somewhere to attract companies. Now, of course, not all are in a situation where they can really pretend to attract big companies. For instance, in the mountainous region, there they have a bit of tourism, skiing, but not so much money. It's only in winter most of the time. And in the summer, they cannot do much in those slopes. So the cornerstone of Switzerland is a system of this redistribution of income between the rich parts and the poorest parts of Switzerland. So I will not explain the whole thing. If somebody is interested, we can once go into the whole system. But basically what it means is that those cantons, which are considered as financially strong, they give 1.4 billion to a common pot, where the Confederation is also using 2 billion of its own resources. And this fund is being evenly, depending on the size of the population, redistributed to the cantons with weaker economic power.
How much is that in percentage of the global budget?
Of the global budget of the Confederation? The budget is something like
70 billion.
70 billion. So actually it's not much. No, and if you look, only the net surplus last year was 2.9 billion. So it's
not very much money, that's what bottom line.
So that system is really allowing to provide most of the parts of the country with sort of even resources and help this distortion of the competition that would happen otherwise. Because, for instance, Zurich has an airport, Geneva has an airport, that's a big asset. So this is also aimed to compensate investments that have been made by the state in the two technical schools, in airports, or in infrastructure which has not reached every country. Since some of you are interested in agriculture, I did not mention agriculture there, but maybe we go back to the first slide. So, obviously we have agriculture, you know, one of the symbols of Switzerland is the cow. I will come back to the cow, it's a very important symbol, not just symbol, a very important animal in Switzerland. So obviously you have all this region here which are the Alps, culminating at 4,000 meters, and this part here, which is the Jura lower mountains. But these two regions are less favorable, let's say, to economic industrial development, and there are lots of small farmers there, and our farmers are heavily protected. They are first protected because the free trade agreements we have with the European Union or with China or with other countries does not include agricultural food products. Then they are subsidized directly, so they receive direct payments. I think I used to know how much they receive by cow. Wasn't it something like $3,000 or $4,000 per cow per year? Something like, so it's significant.
They receive more than the EU. They receive more per cow than the EU.
Oh,
much more.
By far. Then of course the price of the milk is set by the states. The quantities that each farmer is allowed to sell is regulated by the state. Then depending if they grow corn or wheat or potatoes, then they receive different type of subsidies. Then their output is also bought by the state at a certain price, etc., etc. So they have all these sorts of incentives. This is considered, there is a consensus in Switzerland for that. And even a majority in the parliament, each time they try to liberalize a little bit the agriculture, then the parliament saying, no, we want to keep our small farmers healthy and alive.
It's a nature reserve.
Well, actually, it's a national security thing. It's part of our identity, yes. But there is still, in my generation, we have been educated with this idea that if Switzerland managed to survive the Second World War, when all the borders were closed, when we were surrounded by Nazi Germany, that we need autarky. We need to be able to feed our people with our own resources, and for that you need to keep agricultural land and also the technology and the farmers who are able to cultivate that. And this has been a holy cow, or a taboo, ever since the Second World War. I must say that now, with the move of the population, with the demographic trend whereby more and more people leave the countryside for cities, this is tending to change a little bit. I mean, people are less happy to pay taxes for the farmer in the mountains, which is costing a lot of money, and usually voting, well, we come back to direct democracy, but voting maybe not for the causes or for the parties for which the people in the city are voting. Let's continue. So, all this is being held at the top by a government. Like in every state you have a government. Now our government has some specificities. It is that by constitution the number of members of the government, so the number of ministers, is limited to 7. The second specificity is that we have no prime minister. We have a president, but the people who invented our constitution did everything possible to make sure that this president would have zero power. So basically his role as a president is to chair the meetings of the cabinet, and whenever we have a head of state or a prime minister coming, he's shaking hands and having a nice chat with them. Rivlin has more power. Rivlin has much more power than our president. The other thing with the president is that while he is president, he's at the same time the minister. So he keeps his portfolio as minister. And it's only 1 year. After 1 year changes. By order of seniority in the cabinet. So, another peculiarity is that there is only one rule about the representation, that there should be a fair representation of the languages and of the regions. What it has translated as a tradition that you have always at least 2 members of the Federal Council which represent the Latin community, so the French or Italian minorities. For instance, right now, the guy smiling in the middle is our president for this year, Wally Maurer. He loves Israel, he comes here every year, except this year, I don't know why. Next year will come, he was there last year. He's Minister of Finance. Then it's all by hierarchy. Then on the right is the Vice President, who is going to become President on the 1st of January, Simonetta Sommaruga, and she's Minister of, hold on, Communication, Transportation, Energy, Environment. That's it, I think. Yeah. Then here you have Viola Amherd. She is Minister of Defense, Homeland Security, and Sport. Goes well together, you know. They didn't know what to do with this. But anyway, sport is primarily local competence, so there is not much to do. This guy is not a member of the Federal Council, he's the State Chancellor. Now forget Angela Merkel, nothing to do with that. He can participate in the cabinet sessions, but he's not allowed to vote, and basically he's taking the notes. So he will be like the Secretary General of the Parliament. Then behind we have Mr. Parmela, hold on, this one also. Economy, trade, industry, labor, higher education, research and innovation technology. That's about it. Then this one, Ignazio Cassis, this one is a French speaker. Ignazio Cassis is an Italian speaker. He's a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Uruguay has only Foreign Affairs. Sorry, couldn't find anything else to join with Foreign Affairs. Anna Berset, also a French speaker. So this one has social affairs, culture, nothing else. Health. Health. They put health with social affairs and culture. And here is Mrs. Keller-Sutter. She has together justice and police. So we have justice and police together here, which is a bit funny if you think of the separation of power between. But anyway, it's working. There is, of course, the powers of the Federal Council are diluted in all possible ways. First, you have no personality which is dominated by constitution. Second, it is a coalition which really ranges from the serious right to the serious left. It is the same coalition since 1959, with very, very minor changes. But basically you can say that over the past 60 years you have the same composition of 4 parties. The 2 historical parties which created Switzerland, which is the Christian Democratic Party, used to be called Catholic Conservative Party, but in the 70s they thought it was not very sexy to be called Catholic Conservative, so they changed to Christian Democrat, which is not very sexy anymore, by the way, you will see. Then the second one is the Liberal Party, which was traditionally the center-right, liberal, Protestant, and progressive. They are the ones who really created Switzerland after they won the Civil War of 1847 against the others, against the Christian Democrat. And during 50 years, it was a one-party state. They dominated everything. And they really put together the liberal economic and political system, which is now our trademark. Then the third party is the serious right, as I call it. Now it has 2 totally different names. In German it's called the Swiss People's Party, which shows populist, nationalist. And in French it's called the Democratic Union of the Center, which means absolutely nothing. But still, they score pretty well. We'll come to this kind of analysis later. And we money demanded. The socialists. The socialists, of course, so that's the serious left are the socialists. And this coalition has been holding together. So you see, even within the cabinet, there are mechanisms to make sure that whatever is being decided is the result of a discussion of a consensus. Consensus is really our way of government. Now, the power is already, let's say, diluted within the old institution, but then you have two other institutions which are diluting or restraining the power of the cabinet. One is the parliament, we'll come back to that later, but the other is our wonderful institutions of direct democracy. It means that whenever you take a decision, whenever you pass a bill, you have above your head the Damocles sword, you know, the Damocles sword of a referendum. And there are several ways that this can happen. Let me show you a few examples. So, you have two mechanisms. One is the parliament passes a bill, then 50,000 citizens, only 50,000 citizens, can sign a petition, which is called a referendum, where they say we don't agree with that law, we want that law to be put to a referendum, to a popular vote. And if they collect 50,000 votes, then the government... Signatures. Then the government is obliged to make a referendum, and then they need 50% plus one of the votes for the bill to pass. And if there is less, the bill doesn't pass. The other one is what we call the right of initiative. There, you need 100,000 citizens, which is not much. And by the way, this figure has not changed for 100 years, even though the Swiss population has more than doubled over the past 100 years. So it requires 100,000 citizens to sign a text which has the form of a new constitutional amendment. And if the text is adopted by a majority of the people, 50% plus one, and a majority of the 26 cantons, each counted separately, so 14, you need this double majority, then this text becomes part of the constitution. Let me give you a few examples. Last year, I'm starting on the left. Last year, we had to vote on an initiative which was presented by this funny guy there, who is a small farmer, whose name is Armin Kapol, who is actually coming from the village next to me. I regularly saw him in the same shops. And this guy thought, it's a scandal, you don't see cows with horns anymore. So he managed to collect 100,000 signatures to force us to vote on a bill that would give additional subsidies to the farmers who do not cut the horns to their cows. You see the kind of preoccupations we have sometimes. And so it was rejected by 54.7%, which is not much. What is interesting is that in most cities where there are no cows, either with or without horns, and no farmers either, it was mostly accepted. And in the countryside, where you have the farmers with the cows, it was mostly rejected. So you know,
they didn't want to get screwed.
No, they cut the horns in a reason.
They cut the horns for a reason. Yes, because otherwise they hurt themselves. So, so that was sort of funny. That was sort of funny that this romanticism of the cities played in favor. Now, a more serious one was 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, in November 2009, the minaret ban initiative. So this was launched and supported by this Swiss People's Party, because this was the time when they wanted, and they managed actually to surf or to ride on an anti-immigration wave. And their text, which was to prohibit the construction of new minarets, was approved by 57.5% of the votes. I must say what was admirable there is that there was no reaction from the Muslim world. This was 1 year after the story of the Danish cartoons, I don't know if you remember. There was a boycott of Danish products throughout the Muslim world. There were riots, violences against Danish companies or Danish embassies. And there nothing happened because we do a lot of preventive diplomacy, going to talk to everybody, and including the Muslim brothers and the Hamas and the Hezbollah, and everybody saying, well, the government is against, the parliament is against, but the people, you know, we don't. And so that was very well managed and it had no consequences. So now the number of minarets in Switzerland is limited to 4, and I don't see how it could change. By the way, the reaction of the Muslim brothers was sort of cool. It was Sunday evening, we had really expected this to be, I was part of the small group around the minister at that time. And we were really expecting this to be rejected by 60%. And then, well, we got the news, no. So we started to make phone calls to explain and limit the damage. And I was in charge of the Muslim brothers, so I called somebody in the Muslim Brotherhood and asked them, and they told me, no, don't worry, we don't need minarets to pray. And that was sort of a fool. And then there were no consequences. Another pretty interesting one was in 2012, and that shows the commitment of Swiss people to work. In 2012, the Swiss people were asked whether they want more holidays. Nowadays, by law, you are entitled to 4 weeks of holidays. After the age of 50, I think it's 5 weeks. And the bill was proposing to have 6 weeks of holidays for everybody. And you see the result. 2/3 of the voters, they said no, because well, I don't know, either they get bored on holidays, or they like their work, or they were afraid that having more holidays would reduce the competitivity of the company for which they were working. Switzerland is known for the extremely high productivity of its labor force. So the economic people will say this is very reasonable. The leftist people, and my wife, will say we are crazy. Crazy. To propose the Swiss to pay more taxes, they say yes. To have more vacation, they say no. They are crazy. But maybe it shows a kind of maturity. Of course, you see, since the beginning of the Swiss modern states, we voted 628 times on referendums and 216 times on initiatives. That requires, for the system to work, that requires a high degree of maturity and of a sense of responsibility for public affairs. But I think the system works. Let's continue.
Can you say something about what percentage of the population is voting in this referendum?
It depends on the bill. I don't have the figures. It's never higher than 60%. Usually, it is around between 49 and 55%, depending on the bills. Sometimes you have bills, especially local bills, which are very emotional. Like in my village, in the north, recently there was a vote about whether we want to stay in the canton where we are or join another canton. You had 95% of participation, and 51 against 49%, and then the vote was cancelled because there were irregularities, so that's very, very touchy. So it depends how much people feel committed. I think that one of the highest score was on mass immigration.
Yeah.
No? 60s. No. Well, anyway, but usually it's rather low by international standards, but it depends on the bill.
How does voting actually happening there? Like every time they're voting the entire country, like you said, and if it's expensive?
This is not an issue. Nobody has ever said, oh, these referendums are too expensive. Usually what we do is that twice a year they put together whatever we have to vote on, because the same system happens at the cantonal and at the city level. Sometimes you have to vote about whether you want to give 10 million for a hospital or for a new home for elderly people. So usually we have two or three, depending on the years, voting days where everything is concentrated on these days. But frankly, I've never heard any complaint that the system is too expensive. No. This is so much part, these popular rights are so much part of our identity that it's unthinkable that you would deprive the Swiss people from those rights. Yes?
This referendum, there is a work-free day, like in Israel?
It's on Sundays. But we have a system of vote by correspondence, so you can, actually the way it works, you receive the voting material at home, you fill it, you put it back in an envelope with a stamp and you send it, so you can vote whenever you want.
Labor laws are the state laws, or the canton has the authority to?
It's even better. There are some basic frameworks, but now what rules the relationship between the employers and the employees are sets of rules which are decided within the branch, between the unions and the employers. So the state is staying outside. This is being dealt with directly with the concerned people, and by branch. So the rules for the construction, for instance, are not the same as the rule for the machine industry. In each branch they have these negotiations, and usually it happens once a year. They talk about the salaries. How much, what will be the pay rise for this year, depending on the performance of the branch, etc. But usually it's very small. So there is no confrontation. Strikes are extremely rare in Switzerland. Yes?
To who do you pay taxes if you live like in a canton and work in another canton?
No, you pay taxes in your canton of residence. Yes, I don't think that there is. I don't think that not you paying your canton of residence. Yes.
He was asking about labor force strikes and so on. As public sector, I heard that it's not allowed to strike all cantons. Is it true, or only state workers? Are they allowed to strike?
They are. Yeah, but it's true that this was a long battle. The right to strike was enshrined in our legal system very late. For a long time, it was unlawful to strike, but now it's allowed. Now, do we have the right to strike? Yes. You know, we are not. Thank God, we are not like our Israeli colleagues. But it's very much possible that at the local level there are other rules. It's possible that I'm just not aware of. Each canton can really regulate these things independently.
But you said you have enough Italians.
Excuse me?
You said you have enough Italians.
Enough?
Italians.
It's not about their productivity and what.
Italians like to strike.
That's what you want to say. Okay. Well, you know the first the 8% of Italian speakers would kill you or kill me if you would call them Italians. They are Italian speakers and are Ticinesi, which is the name of the canton. Because and it's the same with our German-speaking population and with the French-speaking population. We do not want to be mixed with French, German, or Italians. We are Swiss. We speak French, we speak German and Italian, but we were never part of Germany or France or Italy. And we don't want to be part of France, Germany, or Italy. So this local identity is extremely strong. So, yes?
This system of referendums it depends upon a population that is very aware, as you said, of the political process and of the ramification of each decision. Because if you have a similar system, for example, in Israel, very quickly people will vote to blow up the budget and to not tax anything and to spend everything. And so how did, I mean, I'm more interested about the educational system that has brought up a generation that understands that it is not in his interest to extend vacation. That's a miracle, basically.
Well, this is, thank you very much, because that will allow me to go into more details. To start with, this is the 7th or 8th generation which has known this system. So there is also a tradition within the families, you know. On Sundays or whenever you fill your papers, the kids are around and you explain a little bit how it works. But what is most important is that the sensitivity of a vast majority of the population for the needs of the economy, or to balance the social needs with the needs of the economy, is growing very early. Why? Because, listen to this, 2/3 of the young people in Switzerland, they usually leave school when they are 16 to join companies as apprentices, and they continue their education within the company. Now, my son is doing that. So he's working at a carpenter shop as an apprentice, with a salary, nice one by the way. And after 3 years, he will get a diploma as a carpenter. With that diploma, if he wants, he can enter what we call a University of Applied Sciences and do a bachelor there. And with this bachelor, he can enter one of the big schools and make a master or PhD or whatever he wants in, I don't know, wood engineer or architect or whatever you have in this. But every morning at 6 o'clock he wakes up. Every morning at 10 to 7, he's on the site of the company, so a small company with about 30 people. And mind you, people are paid from 7 o'clock, everybody is there at 6:45 to receive the instructions. And at 7 they start to work. So, and of course you respect the elderly who is, you know, who has the knowledge, etc. So all this culture of how an economy works, what a company is, how to make a company profitable, how much to identify yourself and care for the company is learned at a very young age. And I think this makes people very responsible and mature. And it's 2/3, and 1/3 only is going through the traditional school, high school, university. That answers?
Yes, but I would, is there like an education plan at the federal level to teach about liberalism or basic things about economy or something like that? I mean, because if each school teaches whatever it wants, then you probably had schools that would teach like very bad economic policy.
No, it's really left to the liberty of the cantons to have programs of civic education. In most cantons they have these kind of programs of civic education, but it's more about your rights, you know, to vote, to elect, etc. But I'm not aware that there is any plan about the economy. This is something you learn by working. Madam.
Yes, I was wondering if you can identify the major philosophies that influence in Switzerland. For example, in Israel, you can say that the people who arrived from Europe here, they were dominantly socialist and Marxists, and you know, and there is the religious philosophy or whatever. This is dominant in Israel. Can you tell me about major philosophers that influenced the Swiss culture, let's say?
Yes, I think that we are really the sort of the best illustration of the book that has been written by, what's his name, Weber, Protestantism and the Ethic of Capitalism. So, as I said before, we were also a very in the, let's say, under the old regime until the middle of the 19th century, the professions were divided into cartels called corporations, and it was really very rigidified. And it started in the 30s with, but it was really the ideas of the French Revolution. It was really political liberalism that produced economic liberalism. And those revolutionaries in the first half of the 19th century, which were members of a party called, first the Liberal Party, and then they fought to free the trade, to free the economy, like everybody can establish a company with least possible hurdles, no more customs between the cantons, one single currency, which was not the case until 1848, one single way of measuring, weight and measures, which were different to the 19th century.
Meters?
Huh?
Meter?
Meter, yeah, of course, yes. But before, you know, you had all these American things like inches and so on. The inch of one canton was not the same as an inch of another canton, so it was a big mess. So all this was unified in the middle of the 19th century. But these were really the implementation of the ideas of the French Revolution. And then political liberalism came exactly together when they introduced first, it came at the local level before coming at the federal level. And but then it was really like a revolution of the bourgeoisie, of the middle class, upper middle class. And they were satisfied with a system whereby to be allowed to vote or be elected, for instance, you needed to have a certain wealth. Then there was, from the Liberal Party, emerged the Radical Party, which we call liberal there, but they emerged a few years ago again. And they asked for universal right of vote and right of be elected for man,
of course. Only in the 60s.
We'll come to women later. And then there was a revolt by the conservative forces, which were mostly Catholic and in Catholic cantons. They tried to make an alliance with Austria, and then there was a very quick war that was won by the Protestant forces, and then they really could, because they had full powers, they could really establish this liberal order, which stems from the Protestant values, let's say. You know, the individual, the right of the individual to do business, but also to do politics, to speak, freedom of expression, and all the fundamental rights that emerged from that revolution of the 19th century. And actually, they made modern Switzerland. And what we see today remains the success of those incredible founding fathers of the 19th century, which were mostly Protestants, Freemasons, generals living in the French part of Switzerland, with a few also in Zurich. Now Dufour is the hero for. By the way, the guy who was really the main brain behind all that was also the founder of the Geneva Conventions on International Humanitarian Law and of the International Red Cross.
What's his name?
He was Dufour, General Dufour. He was appointed general of the Swiss Army in 1847, the federal against the conservative forces. And his first step was to make a proclamation to the army, where he said, I want you to protect the prisoners, to protect the women, to protect the children, to protect the clergy people, the people from the clergy, because these are our confederates. You have fought often on the same battlefields in Europe in the past, and we will have to live together in the future. So that helped really with the social cohesion after the Civil War. So let's move to the political party landscape, because it's an exciting moment. We had elections on 20 October, 10 days ago, and there were major changes. An earthquake for Swiss politics. This is the earthquake. So, basically what happened is that this is the serious right. And you see they made, this is 95, and they became big surfing on the wave of immigration we had, mostly refugees from the Balkans, on anti-immigration policies. And then they said more or less that. And they lost, how many seats, Hans Christian?
12 seats.
They lost 12 seats out of 200. We're talking the lower chamber. We have also an upper chamber where you have 2 representatives per canton. But the lower chamber, 200 members, is sort of a good reflection of what happened. So they lost 12 seats. And the big winner is
The Greens.
the Green, which together with, they have a sister party which is called the Green Liberal. This is another funny thing. The Green were traditionally very ecological, a bit dogmatic, leftist. And there was a split from people who thought, well, the green economy is good. So they created something called a party which is green, but the Green Liberals, which is center-right. And also they made huge gain. So what you see is that the 4 traditional parties which are in the government, suddenly one of them has been overcome by one of the Green Party. And the question is, are we going to give a seat in the Federal Council to the 7 to the Green Party? Now each member of the government is elected by the Federal Assembly, so the 200 members of the Swiss National Council plus the 46 of the upper chamber. And on the 11th of December, we'll have a fascinating election because they are saying that they would like to attack one of the seats of the Liberal Party. And we will see if they have enough support for that. So, you know, now it's starting to become real politics. And maybe the magic formula which has been established 60 years ago will change. I think it is an earthquake because it's really the first time since I'm born, and maybe long before, that you have another party that can really enter into this club of 4, which usually represents around 80% of the seats in the parliament. And now suddenly you have this intrusion of the Green. Now this tells a lot also about the mood in Europe. Climate change is very big. Greta came to Switzerland. She had a very, very strong impact, media impact. She was in Davos even. So this is a bit the Greta effect. And people are saying, yeah, but this is because of Greta, and now it's sort of fashionable. But in 4 years, maybe they'll go down again, so it's too early to give them a seat in the Federal Council. So there are lots of discussions. And we will see what happens. Next one. Women. Do you know why it starts in 1971?
Because you didn't have a vote for it.
Exactly. Because the women received the right to vote and to be elected only in 1971. Well, I remember, I'm old enough to remember the day where my father and my mother were sitting at the dinner table talking about what my father should vote. And my father was not completely sure, but he was like, oh, well, I think it would be right that women have the right to vote. And my mother was saying, no, these women who want to be like man, we are women, we don't want to be like man, it's normal that we have other responsibilities in life. So there was an argument. And actually it was rather my mother who was against. Now the funny thing is that 20 years later she became the first woman elected mayor of my municipality. She benefited from it.
If it was like an initiative, like you said before, they collect 100,000.
Exactly.
It wasn't the first time, or they tried a few times?
I think they tried before, but do you know when?
In the 50s sometime.
So you see the gain of women is very significant. Now we have, this is only the lower chamber. I don't have the figures for the upper chamber because it's 2 rounds. So there will be a second round of vote in November, so we don't know yet what will happen. but now we will have 42% of women in the parliament, which for us is a true revolution. So more green, more female. This is what Switzerland will be in the next 4 years, and I look forward to see that. Here you see the gains of the Greens per region and of the Green Liberals, and it's no surprise that the major gains were made in the region with a large urban population, urban, well-educated population, but in the countryside and in the Alps, you see that the people there remain very traditional. They mistrust those Greens who want to abolish the use of chemicals in the meadows, etc. Because farmers are super people, they keep the landscape, they make milk and sometimes good cheese, but they use a lot of chemicals. And for the environment, actually, cows, even cows, are a major hazard for the environment.
For people. It's not the environment, it's for people.
Well, the environment and also for people. No, I'm not talking about the horns hitting you.
No, I mean, it's a lot of toxic.
Exactly. Yes.
So people drink it after.
Exactly, it goes into the water. No, I fully agree with you. Yes?
Do you know if it's effect only also on the private sector, that women also more involved in managing in the private sector than in the past, or maybe it's just men move from the public sector to the private sector and earn more money?
Well, do you have a good answer for that, Hans Christian? Of course, we see more women in the private sector, and more women, not more women than one, but slowly more women joining the private sector. But frankly, we are not yet there, and I would say we are still far from there. I think compared to Israel, we are lower. In the startup scene, high-tech, digital economy, it's a little bit better, but in traditional economies, you know, industry, watchmaking, this remains very much the area of men. And also, which is for me a scandal, well maybe it will change now, the difference of salaries with equal job, equal competencies, equal qualifications remains about 20%. And this is absolutely outrageous. That has to be corrected. Yes?
So with this kind of figures, why do people hire men?
Why do people hire men?
Yeah, it's not, if it's the same qualifications and the same hours and everything is the same, it's kind of counterproductive.
But it's not really true.
It's because
yes,
that's the bottom line.
Huh?
The bottom line is
Why didn't they send us ambassador lady?
when you put everything together and you equalize it, it's much less than that.
Actually, research has been shown that it's because women are less negotiation good than men for the same job. Just men knows how to ask for more than women. That's what research shows. So it's not exactly.
Then there are other factors which are, in my view, all wrong factors, but which I hear often from senior management of companies, which are telling me women are more often on absentee, on leave, then the pregnancy is a problem, because when you have high responsibilities, you cannot not afford to be, in our case, maternity leave is 4 months or 4 months away, and these kind of things. But I think it's more like the force of inertia and the tradition.
Thank you.
Yes?
What's the direction of economic policy in Switzerland, the public opinion? What direction do people want things to go, and what direction have things been going in recent years in terms of social liberalism, economic policy?
Just saw the election.
Well, frankly, our economic policy is purely liberal, which means that we consider the role of the state, be it at the local or at the national level, we have to offer a good framework for the companies to do business. That's all. Now, what has become increasingly important over the last year, and this has been really sort of the important part of our economic policy, has been a reform of the taxation system. So we have just passed through an initiative or through a referendum reform of the imposition of companies, which is of course reducing the burden of the taxes. Secondly, the state is trying to create a better environment for innovation, because to be able to continue to compete in the world like that, we need also to be always at the top of innovation. So lots of investments in our top schools, which are doing the research and development. And then a lot of investment in education, but it is professional education, like apprenticeship also. And there has been recently a reform so that now everybody who starts as like my son, as a small apprentice in a carpenter shop, can end up in a top university with a PhD, because you have the bridges which allow, if you are motivated, if you are good. You
Without exam, you mean?
Of course you have exams, and you have to be good, and you have to be motivated. But if you can, you have the possibility to do that. In other countries where they have this apprenticeship, you do not have all these possibilities. You get stuck somewhere. And this is why many parents, also in Israel, they don't like their children to go to an apprenticeship because they have the feeling they will be stuck somewhere with low paid salary and they will not have the possibility to develop their full potential. Now this system with the bridges which allow you to join university later is really the best, because you combine the technical knowledge, the technical know-how, and then you can acquire the theoretical background you may need if you want to develop yourself. Now there is a study which has been made where there is a very strong correlation between companies which are innovative and the number of apprentices they have. Because these young chaps, 16, 17, they question. They ask, why do you do this that way, and why, you know, so they come with new procedures also. I think it's in everybody's interest. There was, yeah.
You didn't mention hospitals, so what about like doctors? Someone wants to be a doctor. What kind of apprenticeship would they do?
Okay, there you can. Well, I must say most doctors they would go to the traditional high school, university, and then the medical school. However, you could start as a nurse, and for that you would do your apprenticeship in a hospital as a nurse.
At 16.
Yeah, between 16 and like 19. Then you can get a diploma of a nurse when you are 19, 20. And then you could start to go in a medical school, in a university. That would be a way to do it. Yes?
From your world and statistics, the whole system works. Why do you think another countries don't try to copy this like Israel specifically?
You know, well, the first reason is that we are not really, it's not our business to try. Certain aspects of the system are inspiring some countries, especially the education system, this apprenticeship. We have signed an agreement 3 years ago maybe with the United States to try to provide advice and help the United States to introduce this system of apprenticeship of education in certain areas, especially those where there is a tradition of industrial work, so the Rust Belt, if you want. So this was signed, it was still under Obama, it was the end of Obama, and I think they are implementing this program. The French are very interested. There were also some contacts with the French. Actually, 5 days ago, the French Ministry of Economy has released an amazing report. You know, the French usually, they consider themselves as the early brother, the elderly brother, and they look at the small Swiss, a bit laughing. Like the Belgians, were a bit like the Belgians, the small brothers. And then that report was amazing, because it was a super positive report saying we should copy the Swiss model. Because of, look, no unemployment, I didn't mention that, but the unemployment is less than 3% now. So no unemployment, high salaries, high productivity of the labor, super high competitivity in the world. So they are thinking about it. But you know, I'm not there. I'm not even trying to sell it. I'm trying to explain how it works, because it is so much based on roots which go deep and which have flourished the way they have flourished, and we were lucky that it works. That I think it would be very artificial to say, hey, that's the way you have to do it. The traditions are different. Well, yes, yes. So, very similar to Israel, illegal but tolerated. Except that if you go to a flea market in Switzerland, the smells will not be as obvious as they are here. There have been several times attempts, although I don't think we ever voted about that, or I don't remember, to legalize or to decriminalize the use of marijuana, taking into account that the others like heroin, cocaine, all the rest is strictly forbidden. Marijuana, there is a little bit of tolerance. And actually, there's been a lobby of farmers who were in favor of decriminalizing marijuana so that they could produce marijuana. Now, there is a sort of there has been sort of a half measure which has been taken recently, whereby certain types of weed, of marijuana, is allowed for medical not only for medical purposes, but also for leisure, provided they contain less than a certain level of the active substance called THC. And you can buy that in shop. It's called CBD. And it's super expensive, I think, for a pack, which is like a pack of cigarettes, it's like $30. And it has the same smell as in the flea market, but it has almost none of the substance, and frankly, I tried. It's really, it's like, I mean, the smell is a bit. But I think in Israel, the CBD is not even allowed. No, I know my wife once wanted to bring a pack with her and checked and we advised her not. It's like the natural product. What I know in Israel, because I have friends who are doctors exactly in that area, and they tell me that they can prescribe weed with the full power, but only after they have tried everything else during 1 year, and then they can. Yes.
You spoke about the social value. How it goes. I don't know, people want the unemployed people and like how the country taking care about the lowest level.
Okay, so the social care is organized the following way. When you are working, you are obliged to pay to two cash boxes for your old age. One is called the first pillar. It's very low. It's what is it? 2-3% of the salary that we do, or maybe even less. I mean, on the pay slip, you hardly notice it. It's so low. And that gives you a basis for your young age. The second pillar, which is much more interesting, it's another cash box, is run by the companies. It's an obligation, a legal obligation, but it's an obligation to the companies. And the rates are set, and it's roughly half-half. I think I'm paying, it depends on the age, the company, all that, but I think it's something like, I'm paying like 5 or 6% of my salary to the second cash box, and the company is paying a similar amount, your employer. And that goes to an account, and when you are 65, which is retirement age in Switzerland, you can choose, okay, you get the basic anyway, which is, in my case, okay, I'm with my wife, so it would be around $4,000 per month. In Switzerland, it's not that much, and prices are even higher than here. But then you have the second pillar, which is where I would get much more. And then you have a choice. When you are 65, you have a certain amount, a certain capital, and then you can decide either you take everything and you buy apartments, you do something that will ensure you an income, or you take part of it and then you do whatever investment you want to do with part of it, and with the other part you receive it like the other every month. And until you die.
Yeah.
Now, it's a big challenge on how long you are going to live. Because imagine you take nothing, you receive a lot of money every month, but if you die at 67, your wife will still get 40% until she dies, but the children will get nothing. If you take everything and you die when you are 67, then your children will get a lot of money. So it's really a difficult, but you see, it's very well regulated. Then on unemployment, we have also, I think, decent rules. It's now forgotten, they are changing all the time, but I think you get during 1 year 60% of your last salary, provided you have to do X job offers, I mean applications per month, and then you are followed by a coach who is advising you, maybe this job is for you, etc. So that explains why the employment is like 2.67, which is...
But the question is if you have the right, if you want to disagree, like if you don't want it, you can...
If you don't want what, you mean
this kind of pension?
The retirement, so it's mandatory. If you work, even as an independent, it is mandatory.
Oh,
Can you speak about the healthcare?
So the healthcare. So as I said, the healthcare is a cantonal competence. So all cantons, or most of them, they have a cantonal hospital, which is a public hospital. Next to it, you have some private clinics also, but they are not very popular, I would say, because usually they are more expensive and the services are not necessarily better. All this is covered by health insurances which are private. So we do not have a state health insurance. We have private health insurance, and there is a competition, so basically you can choose which one you want. With this health insurance, in principle, you can go wherever you want, in whatever hospital you want, depending on the treatment you need. You want to go to the best doctors. And I would say that we have like the Rolls-Royce of the health system, but we're also paying the price for a Rolls-Royce, because the whole system is super expensive. For my whole family, I have 2 children. For the whole family, I'm paying every month for the health insurance more than $1,000. But then, of course, if I have whatever, I don't need to wait 3 months to have an X-ray, which happened to my assistant last year. She needed an X-ray of the knee, and she had to wait 3 months, and then she made some phone calls, and then connections. So
not so much.
Social medicine.
1,000.
It's not so much.
No. Israel, I don't earn so much, and I pay 500 shekels for me.
Okay.
Just for me. For simple X-ray.
Okay. Wait. Who has not yet spoken? There. Let's ask.
I know that you had a survey regarding the ending the conscription in Sweden. Apparently, you have a successful conscription army system where you only serve for half a year. So my question is, how do you teach people to be soldiers only in half a year with the advance in technology today? And why is it so popular?
Well, why is it so popular? Hans Christian, you are an officer in the Swiss Army. I'm also, by the way, but he's higher than me, so...
I'm not sure.
Captain or Major? Major Baumann.
I'm not sure how popular it is. First of all, only men have to serve, so females don't have to do any military service. And then it's controversial. But for historical reasons, we've had referenda whether or not we should abolish conscription, and they've had no chance. The highest percentage that was for the abolishment of the armed forces was after the breakup of the Soviet Union, after the end of the Cold War. What was it? The pro was
about
30
something and
percent were in favor of getting rid of conscription. That was a big shock. So still over 60% were to keep the system as it is. The way it works today, when you're 19 or 20 as a man, you do a basic military training, which is 18 weeks. And then you go back to your civilian job, and you come back to your unit every year for a repetition course to train with your unit for 3 to 4 weeks, depending on your rank. Altogether, as a private, as a soldier, you serve for about 300 days altogether, and then you're out of the system. And it creates not as much anymore as it used to, but it still creates cohesion, because in the army you are with people from all the 4 language regions, from all the cantons, different social backgrounds, socio-economic backgrounds. I think it's an important pillar of Swiss national cohesion.
And I think you could say the same in Israel. By the way, our system of conscription at the beginning inspired the Israeli system of conscription. There were a lot of contacts in the late 40s and in the 50s, and also in the 60s and 70s, and until now between our 2 armies, with lots of exchange of knowledge and experience.
What is the capital gain tax in Switzerland?
The capital gain.
Les impôts sur le capital dans la bourse, c'est comme ça. Zéro.
Tu avais une idea? Zéro. Zéro. He knows. So wait, we are going to ask people who have not yet spoken. So I think the one behind there.
So, my name is David, and I wanted to ask a little bit about the points of cooperation between Switzerland and Israel, if you can expand on that.
Let's go to the next slide. I am not So, what I want I mean, there is, as I was saying with the example of the army, there is a strong bond between our 2 countries since 1949. It started with the military. It continued with the population. We have over 20,000 Swiss citizens living in Israel, which makes of Israel the 9th largest Swiss community in the world, and the 2nd largest outside Europe and North America. Only Australia still has a little bit more, but with the rate of growth of the Swiss community in Israel because of natality.
Contribution of Amir, of course.
The contribution
of Missy Amir.
I've got 6 on top of me.
Yeah, so no competition.
Thank you, Amir. So very dynamic, very young community. And nowadays our efforts, our strategic efforts is to develop the bonds in the area of innovation, startups, digital economy. There is a simple observation. We are 2 superpowers when it comes to innovation. You can look all the rankings on innovation and you will find Switzerland and Israel towards the top. Now, this is combined with a very different culture, innovation culture. Whereas in our country, my country, innovation is mostly, or research and development is mostly done within the big companies, Novartis, Nestlé, etc. Here, the innovation is very much out there in the startup scene and financed by venture capital, which in Switzerland is very little venture capital. It's really self-financing from the companies. So I think we should learn a lot from your culture of risk-takings, of allowing failure and then bouncing back after you had a failure. This is something we should really learn. And what we can offer to Israeli companies is a door open to the world. We have, as I said, we have a strong economic base. We have skilled workers. We have a strong industrial production, manufacturing base, and we have we are probably one of the countries which is the most open to the world. Free trade agreement with China there is no other European countries or Western country with a free trade agreement with China except Iceland. And we don't really feel we are in the same category. But you know, we are not afraid of the Chinese competition for our products. Quite the opposite. We have benefited a lot of this opening towards China. We are super present on the American market. We are the sixth or something largest investor on the American in the United States, and I think in some innovation digital economy we are even the first. I think I've seen a recent statistic I couldn't believe my eyes. And of course we are totally integrated in the European Union, except politically. But economically it's free trade agreement, we are part of Schengen, the borders are open. We can recruit very easily expert specialists from the EU. Actually, over the past 10 years, in average, we had 80 to 100,000 immigrants from the European Union, but immigrants with a working contract. So all that, I think, would offer a nice platform for Israeli companies who want to radiate to the world, to have a strong basis for marketing their products in the world. I think, frankly, I know that the trend here is to go to California, and sure, California is cool, but we can be cool also. And then
Could be much
maybe
cooler.
we can offer certain things in terms of development of the startups that the Americans cannot.
Good choice of word.
Yes.
Who pays for it?
This is, as everything is also easy. Education, including higher education, is a cantonal competence. So except for the two federal schools that I've mentioned, the cantons are responsible for the high schools, which are cantonal, and the universities, which are cantonal. But this is 1/3 of the children as we have. Next to it, you have the apprenticeship, which happen in companies. And there, the system, you have 230 registered professions that you can learn as an apprentice. Each profession is being designed, and each curriculum is being designed by the branch. So I was mentioning the carpenters. You have the Association of Carpenters, which are defining this is the curriculum that a carpenter should follow to receive the diploma as a carpenter. And then when they study or learn in the company, obviously this is the company which pays. They pay. My son gets about 1,000 Swiss franc salary as an apprentice, and it is his company which is paying. But one day a week, he's going to a school, which is a state school, which is funded by the canton. Now actually it's even a bit more complicated because now they have created a network of schools which are intercantonal. So which covers where you have students or apprentices coming from several cantons, and then this is paid by the various cantons. But that's the gist of it.
So it's not out of pocket money. Out of pocket from the parents.
No. No. Well, that's good. Thanks for mentioning this. The fees, the average fees for a semester in a university is
$650
yearly.
Wow. No, per semester, twice a year.
That's not
very cheap.
And you are talking about universities which have good ratings in Shanghai and elsewhere. Now it's not totally true that there is no pocket money. I just had to pay the books for my son.
Is it
415 Swiss francs.
Is it subsidized? The university is subsidizing those prices?
Yes, by the cantons.
Oh.
Yes?
I want to ask about the tense, if there are tense between the different cantons. You showed earlier that the richer cantons give some money to the less richer cantons. So are there any tensions, like the less richer saying you're not giving us enough money, or there is a very big immigration between the different cantons?
No, Of course, the rich always believe they pay too much, and the poor will believe they don't receive enough. But this has not been a political issue. It will become a political issue next year because there is an agreement to redefine, reform that system. And I think we're entering into very, very sensitive moments where everybody will have to show a sense of consensus. Of course, the rich will say we pay too much, but then the poor will say, it's not true, we give you too much. It depends how you calculate. The rich will say, come on, we have all the economy, we have all the taxes, we have to give you that money, what for? You are poor. Or lazy. And then the other cantons will say, well, excuse me, you have an airport, you have the best highways, you have the best train connections, and you have the seats of most administrations. So of course the money is going there. You know, I live in a region which is about 50,000 inhabitants. And they have made calculations that we subsidize big cities at the level of about 100 millions per year of money which is going out to pay for insurances, you know, car insurance, health insurance, all the taxes. At the end of the day, it's also feeding into administration which has located, etc., etc. So there will be a very, very tense negotiation next year because that will be a very sensitive issue. Sir,
follow up from the question from an economic angle. When you do these transfers from the rich part of the countries to the poorer countries, how you prevent a negative incentive in the poor cantons to not grow and vice versa?
You know, there is a difference between this mechanism of compensation and a guy who is in the street, you know, with his paper cup asking for a few shekels. There we are talking about cantons with an elected government, an elected parliament, political parties, citizens, employers, employees, of course expect that their canton is investing the tax money well. So I think you don't subsidize laziness or so on. I think you are...
I'm not talking about subsidizing laziness, but the incentive to grow. I mean,
well, the incentive remains there, obviously, because
they're paying 60% taxes. You know, and there's something like you said that all the different cantons divide by the other cantons, something like 2.5 billion. Am I right?
It's more actually. 2.5 billion, I think, is the share of the confederation, and you have 1 point something, which is the share of the rich cantons. So it's all together. The main box is 3.5 billion. I think the main box.
So let's say 4. They're not paying 60% taxes on the income of the canton. They're paying a low percent of taxes. So yes, they need to pay it and they don't like it probably, but you know, they want to gain the money, so they pay.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of our coexistence together, and I don't think it creates a disincentive to the receiving cantons to do less. No, actually everybody would dream to be to be paid. Yeah, well, we have to. So I would say last question. So which one? Who has not yet spoken? You haven't. Okay.
So it's 2 small questions. You said that each canton is sovereign. Do they have the right to secede, to leave the union? And in each canton, is it possible for a municipality or a region to leave the canton and become a canton of its own?
Oh, this is a tough issue. So, in terms of secession, there is nowhere written in any constitution that canton has the right to make secession.
So they are not sovereign.
So wait a minute. It is said that the cantons are sovereign in as far as the constitution does not limit their sovereignty. Now, there is one article of the Constitution which says that the Confederation has as a task to guarantee the territory of Switzerland. Now, what does that mean? Would that allow the Confederation to prevent the secession of a canton like, I don't know, Madrid is preventing the secession of Catalonia? This was never tested. So the answer is we don't know. Now, if a city wants to leave a canton to join another canton, first...
not to join another, but to become a canton of its own.
First, you need the canton. We had that case in the 70s. So the way it happened is that first the canton gave the right to that region or that city to live, to create their own canton. The second step was that there was a referendum within the population of that part that said, yes, we want to make a new canton. Then you needed to have the result of this vote accepted by the whole of the Confederation, so as to welcome this as a new part of the Confederation. It took only about 40 years, and the problem is not yet over. Because there is one city, actually mine, which is still hesitating and where votes, and it's complicated. A lot of emotions. You know, this is where you have over 90% of participation. But theoretically possible. Listen, I don't know if Hans Christian still has a little bit of time.
Coming with you.
Are you coming? You're coming with me?
Yeah. Anyway,
no, you don't.
It's a good.
Okay. So you don't have time. You can say a little bit more.
So
listen, we can do it again if you want.
We'll miss you. We'll miss you till the next time.
But please, if you want to do that again, or speak about something else, that would be a great pleasure.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
You guys know I'm Swiss. I grew up in Switzerland, and I want to say something. I think Switzerland. I came back from Switzerland this morning, actually. So I think Switzerland is a great country. I'm biased, but it's really true. It's an amazing country, and I think what we've been trying to do here with, you know, in the Tnua Liberalית Chadasha, and is really to take things it's not only philosophy. It's to look what's working in the world and applying it to real life. And if I'm looking at successful places in the world, I'm looking, among others, I'm looking at Switzerland. And I think what we would be happy to do is to, and that's what I've been trying personally to do, is to bring more of Switzerland to Israel. And you know, I think these sort of meetings are important because I don't think many people know a lot about Switzerland. I think there's a lot to be learned, and the more people actually hear about what's happening outside, what are the successful models in the world, I think the more we can bring from those models here into Israel and actually improve. I am at your disposal. If I can do more, it will be my pleasure. Thank you very much.